Okay, consider a resolution for support of the proposed national monument on the public lands of the former Fort Ord. Councilmember Kemp.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would like to ask, are there any particular aspects of this that you would like to make sure that we cover?
No, I think I had read some rumors about this coming from maybe we could give a little bit of history of what the purpose.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to do that. In fact, the former Fort Ord is being carved up among land use jurisdictions with some areas designated for development, but 2/3 of the former Fort Ord is designated for conservation. And a large part of that will be lands owned by the Bureau of Land Management, about 15,000 acres. There's also a park that's a state park currently open and in operation along the shore. There is a map on the wall back there that shows you the Bureau of Land Management lands that are these conservation lands. The dark green on that map is land currently owned by Bureau of Land Management. The lighter green is land where explosives are being removed and will be conveyed to Bureau of Land Management in the future. And looking at the different ways to approach conservation of those lands, there are a number of different options. The one that is emerging as the leading option is to designate it as a national monument, which is an enhanced level of care for those lands. And it's both for conservation, but it's also for public use for recreational purposes, such as hiking, equestrian, mountain biking, and folks who just want to go out and enjoy the great outdoors, take pictures or whatnot. The advantage compared to some of the other designations that are being considered is, and there's outstanding natural areas, there are national conservation areas, there are national recreation areas. All of those require an act of Congress. In the current congressional environment, that may be a stretch. So the national monument process is done by signature of the President under a 1906 Antiquities Act in which he can designate federally owned lands for special protection. And that's the intent of this particular action. Interior Secretary Ken Salazar was out at Fora about 2 weeks ago really exploring this. He had quite an entourage of very knowledgeable and interested people. They were quite enthusiastic about the lands. They have some remarkable ecosystems, tremendous variety of species. I talked to somebody out there who said there are 950 or so native plant varieties. A lot of those samples will be brought in to our Museum of Natural History in April for the native plant show that comes in. So I think it's a neat opportunity to really do the best thing we can do for these lands for the future, for both conservation and recreational use.
Thank you. I had public comment. Anyone wishing to comment on this? No? Okay. So I had a comment. Did Salazar have indication, or did he speak to about expanding the protection of this area, because the development, actually the green goes all the way up to the borders, and the blue box and the little red box will be, demolishing thousands of trees, but we don't see that here. So did he talk to that at all?
I was not I had a chance to shake his hand and get my 20 seconds with him, but so I was not privy to. I did talk to his deputy secretary for a more extended time. I don't know that those things were specifically part of the discussion around this particular project. It really is separate. Those would not be federally owned lands. He wouldn't really have jurisdiction over them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I think this is great. I support it. I think it's not only important, but symbolic that we preserve as much of this land out there, because this is where soldiers trained who went off to war to protect us, so that we sit here tonight enjoying our freedom. And however we can memorialize that, I think it's great. So I think this is a wonderful idea. I saw the draft of a letter in here, which I think I will add a little bit to it and encourage consideration that the boundaries that you see right now be extended to include all of the wildland out there, and see what Secretary of Interior Salazar has to say about that.
What encompasses all the wildland? What's interpreted as wildland?
That's something that I think the council should consider in the resolution that's before you, whether we want to become involved in that particular topic, because that's a very different topic from what the Interior Secretary is looking to get support for, and I don't know that there's any means that they would be able to do that. So I would frankly just urge that if the mayor wanted to share those thoughts, that they be shared in a separate letter. They could be appropriate on that basis. And moving, just a comment on those additional lands that are wildlands outside of the Bureau of Land Management land. There is a process for review of the base reuse plan, the BRP, that's coming up. There'll be 4 meetings during this current calendar year to take a look at the use for all of those lands outside of this proposed national monument. So that would be really a great time to get engaged with that process.
So are all the cities sending in this generic letter?
They may have different versions of it. I had actually asked for a template and sample, but I had to kind of draw from what was available,
Right.
which included a Congressman Sam Farr letter and others that were strongly in support. The wording between the letter and the resolution are extremely similar to the other letters.
I'll take care of this. Councilmember Fisher?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I don't know how many people have been out in that area. There's a lot of wild area, a lot of trees and bushes. I guess a couple of years ago, took the tour of the areas they were clearing of the ordinance. And they have to do a lot of damage in order to let it come back, but it's really coming back nicely. It's a great area, and I'm also glad to see that it's going to be a national monument and not a state park that the government can shut down until he gets what he wants.
Right.
So with that, I would make a motion that we approve the resolution and the letter of transmittal to the Honorable Ken Salazar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.